If you are a woman over the age of 60 and you are unpartnered, meaning you are not currently in a romantic relationship, I have one word for you: congratulations. That may sound strange, maybe even harsh at first. But stay with me, because it is not meant to be mean. In fact, it is meant to honor something that rarely gets acknowledged. You see, in a world that often measures a woman's value by who she shares her life with, there is a quiet strength in standing on your own. And more women your age are doing exactly that. Not because they have to, but because they want to. They are not waiting for someone to complete them. They are discovering they were already whole. This is not about being anti-marriage or anti-men. It is about being pro-you. And if that makes people uncomfortable, well, maybe it is time we get comfortable with the idea that a woman on her own is not alone. She is free. And sometimes, for the first time in her life, truly at peace. 1. The shift no one talked about. For most of her life, Margaret believed what the world told her, that being partnered was the goal, that sharing a life with someone else, a husband specifically, was the measure of success. She married at 22, raised 2 children, and stayed married for nearly 35 years. When her husband passed away suddenly, Margaret found herself in her late 50s, sitting alone at the kitchen table, asking the same quiet question that so many women ask: now what? At first, the loneliness was sharp. The silence in the house felt unbearable. The world around her seemed to assume she would find someone new, that she should find someone new. But as the months passed, something unexpected began to happen. The silence started to feel different. It stopped being empty. It started to feel peaceful. Margaret began to notice how much of her life had once been shaped around someone else. What she cooked, what time she went to bed, what music played in the car. For the first time in decades, every decision was hers to make. Small things, like reading late into the night or walking barefoot through the house, became tiny acts of self-expression. She was not just grieving her husband, she was rediscovering herself. And she is far from alone. According to the United States Census Bureau, nearly 40% of women over the age of 65 live without a romantic partner. That is 4 out of every 10 women. The reasons vary. Some are widowed, others are divorced. Many simply never married. But one thread connects them. More and more of these women are choosing to remain unpartnered, not out of necessity, but out of clarity. They are not broken. They are not bitter. They are not waiting. They are breathing, living, healing, growing. This shift did not happen overnight. It has been slow, quiet, and deeply personal. For many women, it starts with a whisper, a gentle, honest voice inside that says, "I think I'm okay on my own." For others, it is a loud realization, after years of compromise, that they have spent too long shrinking to make others comfortable. It is not about rejecting love. It is about redefining it. Love in this chapter of life might look like an afternoon cup of tea on the porch, a phone call with a lifelong friend, a weekend spent tending the garden, uninterrupted. It is a kind of love that does not ask you to explain yourself. It just lets you be. And in this quiet revolution, something profound is happening. These women are not simply surviving their later years. They are thriving in them. They are traveling, creating, mentoring, exploring. They are reconnecting with dreams long set aside. They are leading book clubs, hiking trails, starting small businesses, and learning to play instruments they always meant to try. Most of all, they are finding something few people expect to find in solitude: joy. Not the loud kind, not the flashy social media kind, but the soft, steady kind that lives in the bones. The kind that says, "This life may be smaller than before, but it is mine, and I love it." 2. She never wanted to remarry. And that is perfectly okay. When Diane finalized her divorce, she was 39 years old. It had been coming for a long time. No major betrayal, no explosive argument, just a slow, honest unraveling. One day she looked around and realized that what once felt like partnership had become performance. Two people sharing a home, but not a life. In the lawyer's office, he asked her the routine questions. Is there someone else? Did you leave to be with another man? Diane shook her head. No, she said simply. And I will never remarry. He laughed. So did his paralegal. Everyone says that, he told her. You are young. You will change your mind. But she did not. Not after 5 years. Not after 10. Not even now in her 60s. Diane had no interest in becoming part of a couple again. It was not that she was afraid of intimacy. It was not that she hated men. In fact, she still speaks fondly of her ex-husband. They co-parented well. He was, in her words, a good man, just not the right man for my life. For Diane, the idea of being part of a romantic unit never truly fit. It was like wearing shoes that looked good on the outside but hurt your feet after 5 minutes. Marriage asked her to adapt in ways that drained her, to bend around someone else's needs, schedule, moods, and mess. And for what? I used to think marriage was the goal, Diane said. Now I think peace is. And she is not alone. More and more women are realizing that a relationship is not a requirement for happiness. For many, especially those who have already raised children, supported spouses through illness or job loss, or managed entire households, the thought of starting over with someone new feels less like romance and more like work. There is a myth that people cannot be happy alone, that they are always searching, always incomplete. But the truth, especially for many older women, is far more nuanced. After years of centering other people, they are learning to center themselves, not in a selfish way, but in a quiet, life-affirming way that says, I deserve rest, I deserve space, I deserve joy without explanation. Of course, this choice still makes some people uncomfortable. Society is more forgiving of single men than single women. A man in his 70s who lives alone is called independent. A woman in the same situation is often called lonely. But that label does not match reality, because many of these women are not lonely. They are fulfilled. They wake up when they choose. They eat what they want. They control their time, their money, their surroundings. They decorate their homes with things they love, not things that had to be negotiated. They travel when they want to. They say no when they need to. They no longer compromise themselves to preserve a peace that was never really peaceful. There is strength in this kind of solitude, not the forced kind, not the bitter kind, but the chosen kind. The kind that says, I have lived long enough to know myself, and I like her. For women like Diane, life did not end when marriage did. In many ways, it began. 3. When the tables turned. Why men remarry, and women often do not. For much of the 20th century, the story was simple. Women wanted marriage, and men avoided it. In films, in books, and even in conversations around the dinner table, the image repeated itself. A woman dreaming of a wedding, and a man reluctantly dragged to the altar. But something has changed. Quietly, gradually, and unmistakably. Now, in communities all across the country, women in their 60s and 70s are being asked the same question. Would you ever marry again? And the answer, more often than not, is a firm, peaceful no. Not because they are angry, not because they gave up on love, but because, after decades of caring for others, many women no longer feel the need to be part of a couple in order to feel whole. What is more surprising is who does seem eager to remarry: older men. Statistically, widowed or divorced men over 65 are significantly more likely to remarry than women of the same age. And not only that, they tend to do so quickly. While women often wait, reflect, or intentionally remain single, many men begin looking for a new partner within a year of losing one. This is not necessarily a flaw, but it does raise an honest question. Why? Some say it is about companionship. Others say it is about tradition or intimacy or even fear of loneliness. But there is also another, less spoken truth: structure. Many men, particularly those raised in more traditional generations, relied on their partners for more than affection. They depended on them for the rhythm of everyday life, for meals, for appointments, for social plans, for care when they were sick, for meaning when they retired. Without that structure, some men feel untethered, as though the very shape of their days has been lost. Women, on the other hand, tend to approach life differently in older age. After raising families, working jobs, or both, many have learned how to build a day from scratch. They know how to set routines, create community, and find joy in solitude. And perhaps most importantly, they know how to live without constant validation. A woman in her 70s may spend her morning in the garden, her afternoon with a friend, her evening reading by candlelight. At no point does she feel she is missing something, because nothing feels missing. Some call it independence, others call it wisdom. But whatever name it goes by, it creates a quiet divide between how men and women approach aging. One older woman once joked, "When men remarry, they are looking for either a nurse or a purse." The room laughed. And while the comment was delivered with humor, there was a thread of truth in it. Not malice, just observation. Because whether anyone says it out loud or not, the reality is this: many older men look to women to help rebuild their lives. But many older women are not interested in rebuilding someone else's. They have already done it, often for decades. Now they want rest. They want simplicity. They want a life that does not ask them to explain, to adjust, or to start over from scratch, especially with someone who may bring his own children, grandchildren, habits, health issues, and financial entanglements. It is not selfish. It is clarity. And for women who spent much of their lives accommodating others, that clarity feels like freedom. 4. Set in her ways. And that is a beautiful thing. There is a phrase that gets tossed around when people talk about older women who live alone. She's set in her ways, they say, sometimes with a shrug, sometimes with a smirk, as if it is a bad thing, as if having clear preferences, steady routines, and strong boundaries is something to be fixed. But what if being set in your ways is not a flaw? What if it is freedom? When women are in their 20s, they are praised for being flexible. They are told that being easygoing is attractive, that compromise is noble, that molding yourself around someone else's habits is just part of love. And many of them do just that. They adapt, they adjust, they bend, they pour themselves into the shape of someone else's life. Like soft clay, they learn to hold space for their partner's needs, dreams, and routines. But by the time a woman reaches her 60s or 70s, something shifts. She begins to know what works for her and what does not. She has already done the bending. She has already made the compromises. And now she wants to live in a way that feels solid, grounded, and true to herself. She is no longer interested in reshaping her life to fit someone else's mold. And why should she be? By this stage, she has often built a rhythm that fits her. A groove, not a rut. She wakes when she wants. She knows which chair she likes to read in. She eats what tastes good. She does not need to ask permission to spend her time the way she chooses. She has carved out a life that is deeply hers. So when someone asks her, "Would you ever live with a partner again?" the hesitation is not about fear. It is about wisdom. Because starting over with someone new, at this age is not just about romance. It means adjusting to their schedule, their habits, their health issues, their grown children, their past. It means rearranging the furniture, the calendar, and sometimes the very core of your daily peace. One woman put it this way: "I'm not closed off to love. I'm just not open to chaos." That is not being stubborn. That is being seasoned. There is a big difference between being stuck and being settled, between being rigid and being rooted. And women who are living alone in later life, by choice, are often the most rooted people you will meet. Rooted in clarity, in confidence, in calm. They are not looking for someone to save them. They are not waiting for companionship to complete them. They are not hoping for a second act with a prince. They are living their own story, in their own home, with their own voice. And that voice no longer whispers. It speaks clearly and kindly and without apology. Because being set in your ways is not the end of growth. It is what growth looks like when it matures. 5. The quiet power of female friendship. In the absence of a romantic partner, many assume a woman must be lonely. But what if she is not alone at all? What if, instead of one person to share her life with, she has 5 or 10, or a circle of women who show up not just on birthdays, but on ordinary Tuesdays with soup and stories and years of shared history? Female friendships, especially among older women, are one of the most underestimated forces in society. Quiet, consistent, and deeply nourishing, these relationships often form the emotional scaffolding that holds a woman's life together long after romantic chapters close. Unlike partnerships that can be tangled with financial dependence, legal commitments, or caretaking duties, friendships among women in later life tend to be freer, more equal, more forgiving. They are rooted not in obligation, but in shared experience. These are the women who remember what your voice sounded like at 20, the ones who know your parents' names, your children's quirks, your greatest heartbreak, and your silliest dreams. They have sat across from you in cafes, held your hand in hospital rooms, and laughed with you until tears streamed down your face at midnight in a kitchen that still smells like pie. They do not need explanations. They have lived the stories with you. And for many women, especially those who live alone, these friendships provide the kind of daily support that makes life rich and meaningful. They are the ones who text "Good morning," who remember your doctor's appointment, who ask how your knee feels after that long walk, who bring over a casserole when you are too tired to cook, and sit quietly on the couch when words are too heavy to say out loud. This kind of companionship does not fade with age. It deepens. In fact, many women say their friendships became more intimate, more honest, and more life-giving in their 60s and 70s than they ever were before. Perhaps it is because there is no longer any need to impress or pretend. The masks fall away. The small talk gives way to real talk. And in the place of performance, there is presence. Male friendships, though meaningful in their own way, are often built around shared activities: golf, fishing, poker. But female friendships tend to be built around shared truths. Women talk, they reflect, they confess, they remember. And perhaps that is why, in later life, when schedules slow down and identities shift, women are more emotionally equipped to face solitude, because they are not really facing it alone. One woman once said, "I may sleep alone, but I never feel unsupported. My girls have my back." There was pride in her voice, but also something deeper: peace. And there is research to support what these women already know. Studies show that women with strong social connections live longer, have lower rates of depression, and recover more quickly from illness and grief. Not only are they more emotionally resilient, but their friendships actually have measurable physical benefits. It turns out that laughter over lunch and regular phone calls are not just comforting, they are healing. Some friendships begin in childhood. Others arrive later, through community centers, faith groups, volunteer work, or even online forums. What matters is not where they start, but how they are tended. And these women tend to each other with care that is both practical and poetic. They know when to check in and when to give space. They know how to celebrate and how to grieve. They remember the birthdays that others forget, and they notice when your voice sounds just a little different on the phone. They do not ask for much, just truth, just time. And in that quiet exchange, they build something as enduring as love, and sometimes even more dependable. So while the world may measure connection by romantic partnerships, many women are rewriting that script in their own elegant, unsentimental way. They are building a different kind of love story, one woven from sisterhood, steadiness, and shared tea. A love that does not need candlelight dinners to shine. It glows on park benches, on porches, across tables cluttered with old photos and new plans. It glows in the kind of friendship that says, "You are never truly alone because I see you, and I am still here." 6. Alone. And absolutely whole. There is a kind of silence that people fear, the kind that fills a room when no one else is home. But for many women in their later years, that silence has transformed. It is no longer empty. It is not cold. It is not loud. It is sacred. It is a silence filled with the sound of self. In a world that often equates aloneness with sadness, many women are quietly proving otherwise. They are living alone, but they are not lonely. They are dining alone, but they are not forgotten. They are aging alone, but they are not invisible. They are visible to themselves. After decades of pouring into others, into marriages, into children, into careers, into caregiving, they are finally pouring back into their own lives. And what they are discovering is something no one told them to expect: contentment. Not the kind of contentment that comes from settling, but the kind that comes from arriving, fully, finally, and without apology, into your own life. They are not waiting for someone to knock on the door and complete their story, because their story was never incomplete. It was simply layered. And now, that final layer is theirs alone to shape. Yes, there are moments of solitude that sting, holidays that feel quieter than they used to, decisions that must be made without a second voice. But those moments are real, and they are faced with courage. Because alongside the hard moments are mornings of total peace, afternoons spent in the sunlight with no schedule to follow, evenings where a woman can sit with her own thoughts and not feel the urge to escape them. That is not loneliness. That is peace. Some people still struggle to understand this kind of life. They look at an older woman who lives alone and ask, "Aren't you afraid?" As if the absence of a partner is a tragedy, as if growing older without a romantic companion is a burden. But here is what those people do not see. They do not see the woman who wakes up rested because she was not woken by anyone else's snoring or restlessness. They do not see her dancing in the kitchen while she cooks her favorite meal, just for herself. They do not see the way her eyes light up when she finishes a book she chose on a topic she loves, at a pace that suits her. They do not see her taking long walks, planting flowers, writing in journals, starting projects, watching birds. They do not see the profound, quiet joy of a woman who belongs to herself. Of course, not every woman chooses to live this way, and that is fine. This is not a story about superiority. It is a story about possibility. It is about rewriting the idea that a woman's happiness must depend on someone else's presence. It is about expanding the definition of what a fulfilled life can look like, especially after the age of 60. Because by then, you know a few things. You know how to be patient. You know how to let go. You know the value of your time. You know the weight of your own peace. And if you are lucky, You begin to realize that you no longer need to be understood by everyone else, just by yourself. There is no shame in living alone. There is no failure in not partnering again. There is only the question, what does freedom look like for you? For some, freedom is the quiet of a home that is entirely yours. For others, it is the ability to say no or yes without explaining yourself. For many, it is the discovery that solitude is not the same as isolation, and that being alone can be a form of grace. So here in this final act of life, many women are finding something they never expected, not loss, not lack, but wholeness. Not because they avoided love, but because they finally chose themselves. And that choice, made in full honesty, with full clarity, is not something to pity. It is something to admire. If something in this story touched you, even just a line, a moment, a quiet truth you have been holding, I hope you know this: you are not alone. Whether you are living with someone or by yourself, whether you have chosen solitude or simply arrived at it, whether you are thriving or still learning how to, there is space for you here. We talk a lot about wisdom on this channel. Not the kind that shouts, but the kind that listens. The kind that grows quietly, like roots under the surface. And if you are a woman walking this chapter of life without a partner, you are carrying a kind of wisdom the world needs more of. So I invite you, truly, to be part of this community. Subscribe if you want to hear more stories like this. Share this video with a friend who might need it, and leave a comment below. Tell us what your freedom looks like, or just say hello. We read every word, and remember, there is no one right way to grow older. There is only your way, and it's enough. It's beautiful. It's yours. This is Wise Elders Insight, where experience speaks and every voice matters. Thank you for being here, truly.